This is my experience.
Town attorney, town clerk, and a few members from the county and public. We'll stand for the pledge before we begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic and the nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I forgot to announce that this is a Fort Myers Beach management and planning session. Okay, we'll start, as always, with a update from Lee County on the projects that are going on. Bob Phelan.
Rob Phelan for the record, Lee County Department of Transportation. Just here to answer any questions. I believe we sent you a written update on the status of the Estero Boulevard project. So any questions that the council might have regarding that, and give you a brief update on signal.
Bob, I just wanted to, as you know, on our M&P agenda today, we have parking and traffic listed as a subject matter. And you are a subject matter expert on these things, and you know Estero Boulevard well, probably better than most at this point. And we had a presentation a few weeks ago from the state. Very thankful for the county and the state's investment in our community. But there were a number of concerns raised about additional crosswalks, pedestrian overpasses, this is my concern, lack of pedestrian overpasses, or even possibly a tunnel underneath the Estero if it could be done from an engineering standpoint, and also various guardrails, decorative railings, etc., to channel the pedestrians in a way that you don't cross randomly across Estero, which I'm sure you've encountered on a regular basis. I'm curious your thoughts on that, and also just the broader issue of, just given all your years of experience and all, particularly in the business, but also on Estero, any ideas? They can be outside of the box. Any thoughts you have about solving or helping to mitigate the traffic issues on Estero Boulevard, given all your experience on the island and in the profession? And again, there's nothing off the table. So please feel free to.
It's a loaded question.
It really isn't loaded. We're trying to think outside the box here.
Well, I mean, overpasses generally have there's a number of problems with overpasses. Making somebody actually go extra distance, go up a ramp, go up an elevator, go up the stairs, cross over, come back down again. There's a right in the right application. TPI has got the proposed overpass in their design where they're connecting two levels of their facility together. I think that'll work very well. We're going to be signalizing that intersection just as a guide. We're re-advertising our signal probably in the next week or so project, so we're forward with that. Because of that, there's going to be signalized crosswalks at the Crescent Estero intersection, so you may not see a lot of street traffic diverted to the overpass to go over the overpass, and but you will see a lot of it'll divert a lot of their on-site traffic through. Underpasses, they have a huge real estate component. That's aside the point that you're basically putting a structure essentially underwater. Groundwater in this area is very high, generally 100 a foot or 2 feet below the finished grade of the roadway. Yeah. So, you have a high ground, I mean, naturally, because the Gulf is one side and Bay is on the other, you're going to see groundwater level coming through. You have that to contend with any sort of underpass facility, not to mention the size that you would have to do to make it comfortable for a location where you would actually do something like that to transition into the depth that you need at the cover, plus all the utilities that are out there now. Very sewer, you've got water mains, you've got communication, all of those other things establish some depths that you've got to meet with any sort of underpass. So there's those challenges that you'd have to address with any time. Hand railings, this has been a topic that's been batted around for years. You know, the big issue with hand railing is it works well where you can put it. But because of the number of driveways that are proliferated through the project corridor, there are limited opportunities where you could utilize something that could divert pedestrians, them from crossing at random. So you would have handrail and then you have an open driveway where somebody could choose to cross at that driveway location. So not necessarily stopping the problem, you're just pushing it to another location, and that may not be any different than where they were intending to cross. Not like you can push them to a designated crosswalk because you've got a driveway every lot. Sure if I've answered all questions. or if you-
You've helped us understand what's difficult, but is there anything that's possible?
I just chirp in here for a second. That I was reading through some of the traffic studies that have been done over the last 20 years here, and even 20 years ago, they were saying that it's important to make transit at least as attractive as driving onto the island. The idea of moving people as opposed to cars. And I'm right by the white wall there. I noticed there's a good part of the turn lane which is actually closed off, unused. It seems like, is there any way possible to add some kind of HOV lane that be more efficient with getting people on the island as opposed to cars?
I'm sorry, what section are you talking about?
The San Carlos coming onto the island.
That's part of the San Carlos Boulevard D&E study, and then their master redesign study that they've talked about several years ago. I believe they did evaluate an HOV lane, dispute the opportunity to have transit have priority. I encourage more people to utilize it and not, but that's been discussed with that PD&E study, I think.
Is that closed now? Is there any way to reopen that?
They're in the process of doing the design. I believe they're at the 60% designs that. I believe the town should have received copies of the plan.
My understanding is they're going to have another public meeting about that project, additional input. So the county and the town could renew its request for that to be prioritized.
That's something we can discuss. If there's consensus within the council to ask them to read, then that would be, have more weight than just.
Well, I think, I think with most of these things, it would not only take the council, it would take the county also to be supportive of that. And I think together, it would be motivation for FDOT to address any particular issues if just not ask for it and the county did.
I know that the county has put significant investment in transit. I mean, they built the
Park and ride.
they've run the trolleys up and down, and I think all those are a significant improvement. It's just that when the trolleys are stuck in traffic like everybody else, it doesn't make them any more attractive to cars.
I think the reliability of public transportation is a key factor, whether you're using it to commute to work or to an appointment or for recreation. Or even if you're coming to the beach today and you want to, be home by 6 o'clock for something, if you're going to rely on public transportation, you're going to want to know that you can get back to your car, back to your house by the designated time and not have to perhaps leave the beach hours early just to be sure you're going to make it 20-minute drive over the bridge and under normal traffic conditions. So point is well taken. I'm just saying that, we're gonna have a lot of conversation today about things that involve the town and the county. And it takes, a coordination of us from the standpoint of wanting the same thing.
Rob, there's been a lot of anecdotal conversation about, and maybe there's been some studies about how much traffic on Estero Boulevard is folks just taking a shortcut, cutting through Fort Myers Beach. Obviously, if the traffic's bad, that doesn't seem like, it's not a very good idea, but I hear a lot of people talk about that. Do you have any thoughts? Have you seen any studies about how much of our traffic is folks just taking a shortcut through Fort Myers Beach and cutting through on that county road?
So, back when town and county started the discussion of this Boulevard improvements, we did a license plate study where they recorded license plates coming through key points, entering the island, partially through the island at a couple different locations, leaving the island, both directions. And what they found was, and don't quote me exactly on the numbers, but roughly 10% of the traffic during the peak hours was through traffic. So either the remainder of the traffic had a destination on the island at some point, so they either didn't make it from entrance point to the exit point in the time that they were expected to do that. So they either stopped at Publix or a restaurant or a gas station or something like that, or they went to a location on island for their destination.
Maybe they just pulled off because there was so much traffic. They said, might as well sit, get out of my car and go have a beverage while I'm waiting for traffic to dissipate.
Well, a lot of this study was done, part of it was done in the morning. So, when they were doing commuting traffic. So,
And just for the record, I just looked, he gave me that study, a link to that study. It's publicly available, and their study was done, a lot of it just said things that you already knew, but it was done at 4 or 5 different times during the day. And it ranged from 5 to 10%, but they said was just pass-through traffic. It was interesting that there seemed to be traffic coming down and going east was about 5%, and the traffic going west was about 10% pass-through. Why there was such a difference, a little more symmetry, but 5 to 10% in early January, mid-January, which is a busy time. I would expect, just for a little logic, that, the off-season, there's more pass-through traffic because it's more of an attractive option for people than it is during the season.
Yeah. Well, Rob, again, I want to put words in your mouth. You study and work on Estero Boulevard day after day. Anything come to mind that we could do as a council to help mitigate some of the traffic issues that, given your life experience?
I think the council and the town and the county are working towards the best solutions that they do. A bike lane, additional sidewalks that we didn't have. I think just intuitively you can see more people walking on the sidewalks. So they're either recreation or they're going from destination to destination. So hopefully those are people that are getting out of their cars and using alternative modes of transport. Really, the best thing that we could have expected from the project is alternative modes. Only have so much capacity on the roadway. Only so many vehicles can operate on that ability on those number of lanes in an hour. So more people using the lanes than or we can get people out of their cars and using either walking or bike riding or the trolleys, fewer vehicles will be on.
If we, and we'll get the to this when we get to our discussion here, but just wanted you to comment or if you have seen any information on this. And it isn't, it's just part of the solution. Clearly, it's not the solution, but I've had a lot of people talk to me about different things like having the town encourage a water taxi service. It could take people from the southern end of the island to the northern end of the island and also get people across the bay. I've heard talk of a shuttle service that the town could be part of with the hotels and the Chamber of Commerce, where we could get people to and from the airport as the town manager said, a reliable way, in a way that people don't have to rent a car to come to Fort Myers Beach. Have you had any sort of private discussions or thoughts on either of those types of solutions?
No, I mean, but those all fall in line with exactly what we're saying is alternative modes of transportation. Get people out of their vehicles, consolidate them, use a different mode. What we're seeing. All good ideas.
And they've all been knocked around for years.
I hope we continue to knock them around.
But
least 20.
I'll tell you, the holy grail of all of this is that's been poo-pooed over the years is the Mid-Island Bridge or South Island Bridge, an alternative bridge over to Coconut Road, or of course that would be out of the question now, I presume. But, and that was always put down year after year after year and decade after decade. And I don't know, I have mixed opinions about that as well. I mean, it's certainly an alternative evacuation route for us during hurricane season. It's also another way to bring more traffic onto an already over congested road. So there's different ways you can look at that. But so that's the one, that's the biggie that, and of course the argument was that was always that the environmentalists would never allow that to happen. I don't know whether that's the case or not. I mean, every bridge that I've ever seen built, the environment improves, particularly the water and the fishing and everything else. So, but anyhow, so I'm just throwing that out there because that's the big kicker that's always been looming out there. But
We talk about this in more details. As you said, Mayor, all these ideas have been talked about for the last 20 years. I mean, I read through some minutes, things, same conversation, talk about aerial tramways, water taxis. And I think we get into the discussion deeper. There are some things that we can probably do to maybe help to that, not the bridge or something, but certainly some kind of water fence. Their conclusion was that water taxis are more of a tourist attraction than a effective way to mitigate traffic.
what the big thing is really, I believe, is the getting people out of the cars. And Rob, in our mind, the biggest thing is to get people onto those trolleys and incentivize people to ride the trolleys. As the council members say, the trolley has to sit there and the people sit in the traffic with everybody else. There's no, but if you're sitting in your car and you see that trolley whiz by you and go over that bridge and drop people off, people will start to think, wow, maybe that's the way to go instead of sitting in this traffic. So that's always been, but that will take cooperation with the county, the state, and everybody else involved in those roads and bridges. And it's my understanding that the bridge is going to be expanded a little bit, and there's going to be a little more lane added to that. And so it's feasible that it could be done, even if during just certain hours of the day, at certain times of the year, it could be done. So there are solutions but it's going to take a lot of cooperation between all the entities to get that done. And that, I think that's my opinion, is our most feasible solution to the.
If I could we just go back to your update? I noticed that we're slipping into 2022 now.
Well, I mean, it was always intended that they'd finish the final lift of asphalt towards the end of December, which is last paving before, not the final lift, but the final structural course lift. All of the structural pavement would be complete. We'll have so essentially the curbs and the sidewalk, the roadway will all be completed. There may be sidewalk, and then because of the paving schedule with the contractors shut down in
Christmas?
Christmas time, limitations on when the final lift of asphalt, and better on that would going to be sometime in early 2022.
Final lift is just, you said everything structurally is done.
Yeah,
Sidewalks, utilities, everything.
the structural course will be done in December. Final lift, which is the finished course, where they put the final pavement markings on, that'll be early in 20.
We could have some lanes, excuse me, Bill, we could have some lanes opening before that, though.
It's possible they may end up, because of some construction activities, they may shift some traffic around onto the new pavement on we call it the southbound lane.
Yes.
They may shift some traffic onto that southbound lane.
And what's the latest in the structural issues with the Northern Bridge? It said they were going to put a cantilever on there, and there was issue that they couldn't do what they wanted to do without.
My understanding, there's been some discussion from the state regarding evaluating the structural component of that cantilevered section for the pedestrian way. I don't know the full status of that.
I talked to FD. They've had some additional saltwater intrusion since they started designing the cantilever bikeway. And now they have to recalculate whether the bridge can withstand additional weight of that cantilever bikeway. So they have some additional analysis to do for that aspect of the project continues.
Is that bridge approaching the end of its life? On life?
Well, I'm not a bridge engineer or nor do I, see those bridge inspection reports that are done, but clearly it's in a saltwater environment and, you have spalling. You don't address it aggressively, you will get some corrosion of the steel in the bridge. So how extensive that is, I don't know, but clearly it's sufficient that FDOT is checking whether they have to do additional structural work on the bridge itself to support the cantilever, or even with the additional structural work on the bridge, can it support the cantilever?
That bridge is in its 40-plus years. Carlos is in its 30-plus years. It gives you any.
If we work on both bridges at the same time, we'll pretty much solve the traffic problem.
Exactly. Well, that's a perfect segue into my next final question for me. I getting a lot of questions, Rob, about the projected start date for the Big Carlos Pass Bridge. You have any idea when?
I don't know the projected start date. I know that they're working towards the final design.
Is there going to be one final public hearing or?
Believe they've had the public hearing. I don't know if there'll be another public meeting on that or not. On the periphery of the project, so.
Going to beat feet from the beach after this?
I don't know, they're threatening to throw me back on the bridge.
Well, you could be in worse places.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On some of the sections of the stair that's been completed, it seems like I don't know if there's some settlement or some cases where the manhole covers are higher than the road surface.
Yeah,
Visit through the contractor or through general maintenance?
we're monitoring that, and then there's also some of the valve pads that we're monitoring, specifically the ones by Kai. We're gonna have our operations set in 2 weeks, I believe.
I would request that you, when you can, you just obviously have where all those things are on the as-built plans. And check them all, because some of them are getting to the point where an otherwise beautiful road ride now becoming another kathunker because you've had some of these issues, so.
Specifically, one of the locations is where the town's proposing the connection for the Oaks, and we're kind of going to try to address that either in
I'd like at least to
conjunction.
get them identified so that when people call us and say, what's the status of this or what's going on with this, we could say it is on the county's list or it's not on the county's list. They're aware of it. They're, they have future plans to address it or whatever. So
Yeah,
if we can at least get us a list of the locations you've identified as being needing attention. I'll be working off the same list.
I would just briefly, Rob, I don't want you to leave here, and we've said this, I'm sure I speak for my colleagues, we're so thankful for the county and the work that's been done on Estero Boulevard. Sidewalks and the bike paths give our residents an option if the traffic or when the traffic is just out of control. And that wouldn't have happened without your good work. And I just thought it might be helpful for you to comment too, for folks who are newer to the island, some of the other changes to Estero Boulevard, the trolley stops, the turn lane, the lack of, or the mitigation of drainage issues where intersections would be flooded. And those all impaired traffic as well. I just thought I'd give you a second to sort of pat the project on the back. There's other things that's done for traffic mitigation that people may not think about on a daily basis.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm typically not one.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I mean, but for information, I mean, things that we've done on the project to help with traffic on the trolley stops, you notice that a lot of them have we call them chicanes, where they basically shift traffic over. You know, one of the early complaints early on when we were doing the study back in 2000. We heard a lot of complaints about people getting stuck behind the trolleys, having to wait for the trolleys to load and unload passengers. So one of the things that we incorporated in our design were trolley pull-offs where we could do them. It's our preferred. You get the trolley out of the traffic. At locations where we didn't have enough right-of-way to accomplish that, we implemented what we call the chicanes, which are basically where the center turn lane is eliminated, and the one direction of traffic is shifted over into that center turn lane, and that developed a spot where buses are able to pull over and allow passengers to load and unload without impeding traffic. That's a lot of people kind of question that. I mean, I think if you look at the performance of that, and generally that's been fairly successful in allowing traffic to continue on their way and not feel like they're delayed. More of them are down at the south end, but we did have a lot of the chicanes developed in the segment 1 section. Traffic is more congested. And, just the drainage improvements overall have been, say, very successful. Ever been down here, some of the people may not have been down here in the last 10 years. For the last 10 years, they didn't see the road before, and sections of it would flood with inches of water, which are able to wade through the water and require vehicles to slow. The center turn drain was not necessarily the preferred option, but it's really what we had to do in order to get drainage on the site. Always been the challenges of utilities and committed right away. Center turn drain lane and the drain system provided us an opportunity to collect the water and to treat the water location. And acquiring somebody's piece of property to put a pond on the site or having other means of treating them was one of our directives, was acquire anybody's property to do. Fairly successful.
It's been hugely successful. That was a game changer. Appreciate that. Any further questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I
Yes,
may, just
sir.
a couple questions. Rob, thanks for coming out. As always, you give us, some time to give us an update. The people enjoy hearing from you so they can stay in the loop, if you will. A few things that you had mentioned, as you said, the sidewalks and the bike lanes have become very substantially used. At least I've noticed it. I'm sure my colleagues have as well. People enjoy it. They really can't wait to be able to go up and down the island. We later have a joint meeting with the Public Safety Committee and some of their concerns that they would like to have addressed that they haven't gotten answers to. Maybe you could provide some insight on. The bicycle markings, like the ones we have put on the north end of Estero Boulevard, the green markings. I don't know if you've been involved in those conversations. Commissioner Sandelli and I have spoken many, many times about it. I'm sure they're going to be asking about an update on that. Maybe an interlocal agreement with the county on something like that. And then is where the bike lanes end up towards, Red Coconut. They've asked about potentially doing an interlocal with the town about putting a stripe down the line for bikes on one side of the sidewalks, and, pedestrian walkers on the other. And third, trolley stops. Is there any plan from the county to put shelters at the stops like they do throughout Lee County, at some of the trolley stops or none of the trolley stops or all of the trolley stops?
Well, I don't have the information about what Lee Tran is intending to do. Stops. I believe there's ongoing discussions between the town and Lee Tran about trolley shelters at the trolley stops. I can tell you what we've done through the project is try to provide ads, some of the trolley stop locations where we had right away that was available, provide pads so that a shelter could be installed on there, limited modifications. So, because some of them because some of those pad sizes and they look fairly large. That was intentional at some location. Meant filter if they. As the green bike lane markings, typically, Lee County's limited applications of green bike lane markings. I know we have a few locations where we're intending on doing that. Typically, what we would follow would be the requirements that are in the FDOT Green Book. All for using, if you're going to use the green bike lane markings, use them at locations where there's conflicts. If you have vehicles crossing bike lanes, that would be a location where applies a green bike lane mark. Typically wouldn't. It's not recommended in the green book. Not to say that it's not done, but striping the whole bike lane green that's a maintenance problem, especially on an island where you've sandpaper running down the road.
Because I know like with the reflective white strips, if you're on a high pressure bicycle tire and it's wet, it can be really slick. This lane markings, they suffer that same problem.
Oh, the green bike lane, I mean, they obviously, if the state's approved use of green bike lane markings, they've evaluated performance on bikes, and it's not to say that if you're going on one of those super skinny tires and you lock it up on a wet, rainy road, you're not going to slide a little bit more than you would. They do have additives to the material to help improve the friction or the thermoplastic that's.
Rob, where I've noticed my biggest concern that I've noticed on the bike lanes is where traffic can turn right, especially when it's backed up and you've got the dotted lines there, and then there's always a bicycle person. That area at least seems like it would be very important to the increased usage that we're seeing to make it as safe as possible. I can tell you personally, I've been almost run over a couple times by someone at the last second to try to get out of traffic. Looks right, and they don't see anybody there.
And that's the intent of that dashed line. Is to bring attention to both, and that the green bike lane markings are not necessarily, or the dash lines are not necessarily intended only for the motorist. All those features are intended to bring awareness to potential conflict points. So that means that the cyclists and the motorists should be paying extra attention when they encounter situations. So, always whenever you are seeing that dashed line, cyclists should be looking, there's a potential for a vehicle to be turning at this location. That's the intent of that skip line.
Has it moved any closer to a resolution as far as doing it or not doing it?
I believe there's discussion probably above my level about whether we implement.
Well, just to add on it, I think one of the things as those discussions happen, Rob, and you report back about conversation here today, that because we deal with a highly transient tourist destination, things that may make a lot of sense to you and I as Floridians who live here, more obscure to someone who's just here visiting. I mean, someone from Iowa may think those dotted lines means that's the place that you should unload passengers and open the passenger doors, and they're not looking for bicyclists coming down the lane. So, it's just, we have a lot of people here who are not necessarily familiar with the Florida traffic laws, and anything we can do to, pictures help them understand. I think that's the European model, is they use pictures because have people from different countries going to different places. Don't always understand the language or the process, the procedures, but they can recognize a picture. And so I think a picture of a bicyclist that's from a distance would be helpful, even though it's not required.
Well, you bring up a good point. That it's important to utilize a system that's recognized uniformly from every, and that's what the MUTCD traffic control devices intent is to establish a uniform system where somebody from Florida understands the same information as New York or New Jersey or Wisconsin understands. And that's what a lot of the pavement markings that are out based on. Not something that we that's what we don't want to do, is create only understandable Myers Beach.
Counselor Allers, did I miss it? Did he answer your question about the divided sidewalks?
I did not.
Oh, would you touch on that one? Because that's I'm curious on that as myself.
I know that there's been some discussion about the divided down there, and if that's something that the town council wants to bring forward to the commission or to DOT director to implement, we'll evaluate that. I just spent some time out on Sanibel this past weekend, and you saw, maybe some of the ideas are coming from where you see some bike lanes that are out there that are the yellow stripe that runs down the center of the asphalt path. Got a mix of users, area where they're implementing the bike lane. I think it's important to the question will come down to who's going to enforce that. Now, are you going to try to enforce it? Not a bicyclist that's riding down the right side of the sidewalk, assuming they're going in the direction of traffic. I would place them. Actually, what you want is would place them. Would want the cyclist on the side between the stripe and the curb. Them on the right side. The left side as they're going. And if you were thinking about that, one of the things we had to do with that corridor is in order to comply with ADA requirements and all the driveway locations, had to have a flat area on the back side of the sidewalks. And got all these driveway locations where you've got that spot side, ramp on the other. So now you're forcing the cyclist to go up and down that ramp section as well. That's problematic for the folks in the three-wheel bicycles or the kids in the tricycles. Because you have what happens is when somebody in a multi-wheeled, more than 2 wheels, over something like that, they're going over that the grade. Some to push people, those trikes in one direction as they go over those curb ramps. So now you're basically telling all cyclists that they have to operate at a location opposed to going where they feel comfortable, which would be our section of the sidewalk, which would be the other side of the stripe, which would be wanting to put the pedestrians. Oh, there's
Well, Rob, along those lines, one other thing I kind of forgot about until you were just talking about is the crosswalks. We've talked a little bit about funneling people to crosswalks and things like that. What does the Green Book say, or is there any standard operating procedure in the Green Book as far as colored markings and sidewalks? I know down in Collier, they have several all over the area down in the Naples that I mean, you can see them for half a mile away, the crosswalks coming up. Is there anything that Lee County can do with the crosswalks on Estero Boulevard to help draw attention to it for the pedestrians as well as the drivers up and down the street?
I mean, there's a number of levels of enhancement. The colored patterns in between the stripes is not necessarily one of the tools that are used to enhance the sidewalk. It's not part of the tool palette. It's more of an aesthetic feature. The Green Book or MUTC has specific requirements on what colors and configurations can be used in the crosswalks. So they want to avoid things like piano keys, crazy artwork and stuff like that, which doesn't meet the color requirements of crosswalks. But there's a number of levels of enhancement, and each crosswalk would need to be looked at uniformly to figure out what's the appropriate level of enhancement if it's needed, if there's an actual issue that's going on.
Excuse me.
You know, those could range from in-road pavement marking, lighting, RFBs. There's a number of things that can be used at the right location. What you don't want to do is you don't want, and anybody that's heard me talk about this for years, they're hearing the same story, is you don't want to do something that's going to create a situation where people become oblivious to a crosswalk that's more important. I don't want to say more important, but you need to bring more attention to. So back in 2013, we did this huge project where we came through and with the help of the safety committee, we identified a number of signs that we felt were distracting to drivers. Eliminated a lot of those signs and been a demonstrated improvement in the safety that's associated with that. Had a huge crash issue that was occurring, and that seemed to decrease after we have those signs. And one of the reasons we thought was happening was people were becoming oblivious to sign blind. Saw so many of those signs that they didn't pay attention to the ones that really needed to be. I want to do with the crosswalks is create a situation, become oblivious to every crosswalk that's out.
I've noticed that as I drive around, the area, you see nothing is repetition when it comes to the crosswalks. One may be a small green stripe, one may be a solid block green, one may just have a crosswalk light, green markings, or that I've noticed that, to your point, that nothing's been consistent so that you don't get that eye fatigue of seeing the same thing, especially we've got almost every beach access has a crosswalk. So I could see your point there, but if it's something that the county could look at potentially to enhance the safety of crossing the crosswalks.
We monitor the crash patterns that are occurring on the corridor, and if we think that's becoming problematic, or if the town sees a specific location that's problematic, obviously you're down here more. Those specific locations.
Okay,
Just on that real quick point, Rob, on those crosswalks that are under construction, which had the flashing lights, those, is it the county's intention to continue to have those flashing lights once the construction's done? Crosswalks, I mean, you know how you could push the button and then all of a sudden they start blinking and flashing, people stop, people cross.
We have installed a number of, I think you're talking about the RRFBs.
Right in front of Santini Plazas, they've got a couple
Um,
on there.
Don't know if we have in construction any sort of flashing beacon part of our construction activity, but we will be installing an RRFB set at the crosswalk that was, the south driveway of Santini Plaza. That was identified as part of the committee's analysis back in 2013. Crosswalk in that location.
Right, where you could push the button and they would start flashing.
Correct.
So they will be replaced when the construction's done.
Yeah, and the one at Wyndham, that one will be replaced
Those were
as well.
very effective, by the way. Yeah, I thought.
I will caution you on the use of RFBs on three-lane roadways. Oh, new criteria that's come out from the state is that if you have an RFB, put a new RFB installation in. And what we're doing is a lot of these are designed under the old standard. If we choose to design a new RFB, you need to have one of the median islands on a three-lane roadway. Right? Oh, where we have a lot of these crosswalks at the intersecting side streets, it's problematic to install a an island at that spot. The state says that if you've got 3 lanes or more, and they consider a center turn lane as lanes, that an island required at an RFB location. And to keep in mind where there's a desire to have an RFB at a new location.
very good. Okay. We've covered
Okay.
Estero Boulevard pretty good, well here this morning. Rob, thank you very much. Been for a little over time on your way out here. You did yeoman's duty this morning. Thanks again, and keep it going.
Rob, thanks for being responsive to my list questions.
No problem.
All right, we'll
you,
move
Darren.
on. Next item is the discussion of removal and installation tree requirements for single-family homes. How do you want to start us out on this?
So, I think we're all familiar with the challenge of people trying to try to build bigger homes on their properties and expand their existing structure on their properties. And in some cases, there are what we term as valuable trees that are in the way. What we don't want is those trees to sort of disappear, overnight. We would like to be sure that we have a good process whereby those trees are recognized and retained if possible, and if not retained, replaced. And if they can't be replaced in that particular parcel, to be replaced elsewhere to benefit the public, because of course, beautification and its effect on the environment is to the benefit and value of us all. So we do have an ordinance in place, and the question is if their council would like us to take more aggressive action or different action with respect to enforcing it.
Roger, is there anything in place as far as like tagging trees? Some developments, commercial developments, they'll go out and they'll tag trees that they want to save, whether it's the developer or someone else. Is that something the town can get involved in, or is that a practice that would be feasible here?
Oh, I can tell you that there are places where their regulations run the gamut that say you can't remove a tree, period, without the town coming out and inspecting the tree before you take that action. So, and if you take down a tree is presumed to be valuable, but without obtaining a permit. So that would be sort of one end of the spectrum. And I guess the other end of the spectrum would be sort of self-reporting, where a person might voluntarily call the town to come out and look and say, look, there, want to do this, or there, these trees are in my way, or are there any of them I can remove? That's sort of on a voluntary basis. So that's the spectrum, and, we could do anything in between. Clearly, if you don't want to lose any, by mistake, or, on the part of a property owner, or someone who's working on someone's property, you would tend to trend towards the trees can be removed without our inspection by the town, and a tagging of the tree, whether it can or can't be removed. And if it's a valuable tree that's in the way of your project and no mitigation can be identified, third tier responsibility of the property owner to see that tree replaced elsewhere, if not on their property.
Guess my concern is that we're somehow missing the boat. Currently, we have we don't need to do an ordinance. We have ordinances and statutes in place, but we don't seem to be enforcing them. When I'm looking at the stuff in our notebook, it indicates that tree permits will be incorporated into the building permit for the site. Problem is, by the time you've got a building permit, they've already torn all the trees out. I don't know if we need to attach the tree permit to the demo permit, because that's when they're ripping all the trees out, is when they go in and do the demolition.
Madam Vice Mayor, I think you're right that happens, but I think you have the people who sort of tend to try to comply and try to and want to do the right thing. And unfortunately, we also have some others who will do things in advance of even approaching the town. They know they're going to come to the town for a permit or something, whether it's for demo or for building or both. But before that, by hiring ABC landscaping company to come remove a tree or whatever. So
That's not what I'm seeing is the problem.
okay, well, I'm just saying that I've seen that occur personally here. So I'm not saying that your point is not correct. I'm just saying that there may be a further level beyond that.
When I'm seeing them rip out the trees is when they're doing the demos. They're coming in, they're ripping down the buildings, and they're ripping literally every tree out of the lot when they're demoing what's there. And our statute says you're not supposed to be doing that, yet we seem to have no enforcement of it.
I kind of read this section on page 18 where it says there's an exception of trees, if not removed, would allow a landowner no beneficial use of a lot or partial, or would place an inordinate burden on the landowner, is a pretty general exception.
Right, but they're not, we're not even getting to that point. They are not having to come to us and ask before they say, I can't build my house because this tree is in the way. They're ripping them out before we even get to that point.
Maybe in some cases, I know there was one near me where it was actually an undeveloped lot that was fully treed with oaks and single palms, and they tore every tree out after they got a permit to do it. And then they put a building there and there's no trees.
You know that their demo permit permitted them to rip out all the trees?
I was told that at the time because some constituents came to me with concerns, and I talked to the town. They said they were in the process of working on the permit to have those removed.
I guess that's my question, Roger. Are we, when we do the demo permit, are we allowing them to take out all the trees?
Well, I can tell you that it's not my desire that to allow that to occur. And I will make sure that staff, that's reiterated to staff, to be sure that they understand that.
Ed, do you have any knowledge of this? Do you get a chance to look at demo permits and tell them, hey, this is a good tree, or?
Morning, Chad Schutz, environmental staff. So yes, current policy is, if mowing, adding impervious area, protect the trees, our vegetation permit, in accordance with the ordinance. So there was some lots kind of more years ago where it did seem like there was at some stage vegetation and it wiped out, maybe no vegetation permit was there. Seems like that's kind of gone away more and we're requiring permits with that. There is in the tail end of the permitting section for our ordinance, where the director may require that, you know, protected trees by this article are relocated to the same parcel in lieu of removal. So maybe some explicit direction on how you want it to handle, which is a lot with Councilman Beach referred to, where there are a lot of oak trees, cabbage palms, etc. Level of burden to put on property owners for locating or replacing those trees, so that staff accordingly.
Do you feel our ordinance gives you the tools you need to do what it is we'd like to accomplish?
I mean, like I said, there's a green sheet or a blue sheet I printed out in black and white green sheet. So there are some strategies that we could, you know, in the background, there's the challenges that are presented, and then some of the ideas where that other municipalities implemented, and maybe other out-of-the-box ideas we could do. So I think there are, you know, the removing 3 trees annually if there's already a single-family home. That there's no criteria. You know, it could be a 2-wide oak tree. It could be a 2 tree. There's no investment tree. There's no, you know, valuable tree, you know, criteria to govern that.
When I look at our statute, I see this chart with all these trees named. Isn't that our guidance?
Those are protected trees, right? But what I'm saying is, a person who has a house, per the ordinance, there's an exception where an existing single-family home can remove up to 3 protected trees annually without a permit explicitly. On top of that, you have the state statute where if they have an arborist, we can't even require a notice or a permit, et cetera, if that arborist says that the tree is 10 feet away from the house, and if a hurricane comes, it's a clear and present danger. There are challenges there.
Specifically, when I'm looking at this, see several suggestions. I guess I'm really not clear. If you could wave a magic wand and change something in our code to make it work better for you, is there a sentence you would add, or is there something you would do?
Sure, some language, you know, whenever they're coming in for permitting, whenever they're maybe asking us for something such as increase in impervious area, or redeveloping, you know, knocking down a house and putting up a new house, attaching some canopy requirements to that.
Okay.
Whether it be existing or new trees?
For instance, again, just going to Councilman Beach's example, because that's a good example where there is a lot of older oak trees and cabbage palms. They, you know, arguably for the guidance on criteria for issuing a permit, setbacks, et cetera, arguably they needed to remove all those trees. So for removing all those trees, it's guidance from y'all to require replacement. If there's facts don't allow those replacements, what do we do? They're building a pool and need to remove trees, and it's right in the middle of the pool. And if it's a a 1 inch, or sorry, 1 foot wide oak tree that, oak tree and we valuable, require that to be relocated, which is a huge, require that to be replaced in kind. What does that look like? Is it a bunch of small oak trees? Is it a 1 foot oak tree that, I mean, everything that we ask has a huge has an expense to so level 2, and then the setbacks even allow for it once, you know, if we're requiring it.
If I may just add to that, so, you know, as a government, we have to decide, we as a policy standpoint, we want to maintain the existing tree canopy. We're okay for the existing tree canopy to be reduced because we have so many trees. We feel that the tree canopy is inadequate, it needs to be increased. And if our position is we want to maintain existing tree canopy or increase it, then also the arbor situation and other things, we basically have to tell people that you would say to them that it's not that you can't remove a valuable tree if it's truly in the way of your project, but A, we have to have a process to capture that. B, we have to have a process that forces them to replace that canopy either on their property or on some other property within the town. So the overall tree canopy of the town remains the same or increases if that's our desirable goal. And then the legislation is adjusted to facilitate that. And, you know, if you start bringing factors of cost and, you know, other considerations, then you're watering down your policy. So you have to just really,
A firm stance, one way or the
you know, decide where the stance is. And if your stance is our tree canopy is inadequate and we need to increase it, then even an arborist says that the tree's within 10 feet of your house, or the tree's diseased, or that, you know, has another legitimate reason to remove it, we have to decide whether it's part of our policy. We go to that property owner and say, well, that may all be true, but nevertheless, you have to replace it. If you can't replace it on your parcel, you have to do X, Y, and Z. So the town's overall canopy remains the same or is enhanced.
Roger, what you just said, I'm just curious, John, I thought there was a new state law that gave proper, it was a preemption law from the state legislature that said that that the arborist could determine that the tree is a hazard, then therefore there's nothing the municipality could do about it. Then also, I thought the state legislature said that you can't require the replacement of that tree. Is that your understanding of the legislation?
The packet on the last page before the handout about reducing urban heat. Chapter 163045, the local government may not require a notice, application, approval, permit, fee, or mitigation for the pruning, trimming, or removal of a tree on residential property if the property owner obtains documentation from an arborist certified by the International Society of Arboricultural of Hawaii, Florida, licensed landscape architect, that the tree presents a danger to persons or property. So it's not a blank check. There are specific conditions. There has to be a determination by a certified arborist or a licensed landscape architect that the tree presents a danger to persons or property.
Would you also opine on the town's ability to require the replacement of that tree?
It specifically says you cannot require a permit, fee, or mitigation only for a tree that is certified arborist.
That particular tree that was determined a
That's correct.
hazard, yeah, okay.
But you know, what you can do is you can say that every property has to, any newly constructed home has to have X number of trees on it. So you're not doing it because they're removing that one, but you say that they have to have X number of trees. So there are ways to deal with this, perhaps, if that's the policy of the council.
You know, years ago, when the comprehensive plan was first made, it was more of a suggestion at the time that people And the town even went so far as to set up a program whereby people could get free trees to plant, because we wanted to create that canopy on the side streets and elsewhere. So it was voluntary. So that's the question. Voluntary apparently hasn't worked satisfaction of some people. So that's the question. The policy should be whether to require it or to just suggest it. So that's kind of where we're at. But we have been down this road before, and that was in the designers, and everybody at the time was all for that, which is beautiful. I mean, when it happens and you're on that street, it's absolutely lovely. So it's just a matter of whether the town wants to make that law.
I want to just say for the record, I'm not an unreasonable person. If you've got a diseased tree on your property, you need to take it out. But it doesn't seem to me that we are at that point. What we're doing is we're allowing to everyone to completely denude their lot of trees. There has to be a middle ground here where we could, hey, look, folks, you need to be putting some trees back if you take all these trees out. So I don't know if it's something that we can, and I'm not an expert. I don't know enough about this to be able to say, do this or do that, but maybe we could, as a council, give a consensus that Chad would work with John about what we could do that's the appropriate middle ground here. Like I said, I don't believe that we should even be trying to do anything that the state is reasonable here when it's saying that of course you should be able to take out a tree that's dangerous to somebody or a diseased tree. That's not where I am. I'm just saying we are very far away from that position. We're way over here where lots are becoming deserts. I don't know if any of you have looked at the lot at the corner of Jefferson and Estero, but they literally denuded that entire lot.
Yes.
If I can just speak to that real quick, sorry. I think that was where it was lined with maybe Australian pines.
And I know that some of the trees that were on that lot were not valuable trees, but that's an example of what I'm seeing elsewhere across the island. I can't believe that every lot where they're ripping out every tree is, they were all crappy trees.
If I may, I think that both, everyone's touched upon really what I perceive to be the potential solution here. Manager and Chad have talked about the need to be maybe a little bit more forceful up front. The second half of that equation is if you wish for us to do so, is to enhance or increase the post-development landscape requirements. It's to say that, hey, if you clear a lot that had 4 trees, because they don't allow you to build where you need to be able to build, and we just went through that, by the way, if you all recall, with the right down the street, where they came in for the PD hotel redevelopment. There's a tree right in the middle. They have to remove that tree, and that was part of the discussion.
Yes.
So it may be that we need to enhance or say that, hey, if prior to clearing, there's 4 trees, instead of just meeting the normal landscaping requirements, you have to put 2 additional trees to mitigate or account for the removal of those trees. I don't know if that already exists in the code. I would defer to staff, but that would appear to me to be the second component of this issue, is maybe enhancing or putting more oomph behind the post-development landscape requirements, that it's not just landscaping bushes, it's trees of a certain size, certain height, certain diameter. I think it's BDM is what the term is. So we can look at those issues, but as I think everyone is pointing out, the existing regulations, in comparison to some of the others that we've given you as examples, are not too far off. And maybe it's just, being more aware of what's, taking place. Then on the back end, saying to that property owner, hey, you removed we allowed you to remove these 4 trees because it didn't fit or allow you to develop your lot. But now as a result of that, you have to put in X more amount of landscaping.
I'd be in favor of, I don't know if there's any consensus of having our staff look at brushing up our ordinance to make it work better for them.
Sounds good to me.
I don't have any problem with that. I think we probably want to be sensitive as we discuss view corridors as well, that we figure out a way to balance that so we're not.
But see, to me, a tree is part of the view. I
agree.
love seeing a tree. So trees to me are not,
Oh, no, I was thinking in terms of on a stereo trying to see the ocean, but yeah, I get
But
you.
that is a point though, because are we saying that, well, shrubs obscure the view and trees are the view? I mean, because part of the conversation we're having about view corridors was specifically not allowing shrubs that would block the view. So
I'm sure there's a happy medium we could find.
All trees.
Well, again, one of the fallback positions that other municipalities utilize is that if we have a requirement of whatever it is for tree canopy on a property, and you can't meet that the property owner can't meet that through their best efforts, that there's a way for them to pay to a tree fund or do other things so that the town in its entirety does not lose canopy.
Mitigation.
Kind of offset.
you've mentioned that a couple of times. So what's your thinking in that, Roger, that they would put a tree on Bay Oaks or Town Hall or some town property or?
It'd be, it's something as simple as, for example, Bill, I know you did some plantings as part of the garden club, those types of things. Look for opportunities. Our goal is to maintain the existing canopy and or increase it. We can find those opportunities. We can create those opportunities. We have the street ends. We set a street end that lost some trees to some unknown
handle.
We have Virginia that has no trees, for example, on it. And we have other places like that we theoretically could put trees if that was the objective of the council.
I have a question. When we get a demo permit, do we go out and take a picture of that site before they demo so that we know what it looked like?
Requiring that.
And we wouldn't have to have an ordinance in order to do that. We could just make that something that the town does, that we go out and take a picture. So we've got proof if there were any trees there.
Yes, we can.
There's no argument.
There's no argument there that,
There's no
that
argument.
we could tighten that process up.
Goes back.
I'd like to see us do that. Take a picture. If anybody applies for a demo permit, first thing we do is go out, take a picture of that property.
I think it goes back to what I said at the beginning, as far as if we're gonna go that far, do you want to go even further to have the staff put ribbons on whatever trees that are,
The problem is
Should
I don't
stay.
think staff's allowed to enter private property.
For a permit,
which would give it,
permit
which
inspection, yeah.
would allow you to be able to do that?
If they apply for a permit, they would.
Well, I just think that it gives the town a little bit of security as far as not just pictures.
Sure.
You know, if you have this blue ribbon is this type of tree or a tree that needs to be saved, or this one is not necessarily, it's an invasive species or something, that this is okay. I think it becomes very clear to the applicant as well as the town as to what trees were there, what trees can come out. And if for some reason the trees have to come out, it gives us a better idea as staff and council as to if they want to come in and say, I need to move this tree, even though it doesn't have to be moved. You can have a reason to move it
I think
somewhere.
that's something we can do once we get to ordinance changes, but that starts getting complicated enough that we need to have something in writing about it. Whereas
Oh, yeah, I
the
agree.
picture taking, I think we can just start that immediately without,
And what about establishing a time period prior to coming in for permitting? Whether some of these trees mysteriously disappear 6 months prior to, I guess that would be almost impossible to,
Well, no, I mean, there are ways to do actual tree surveys of towns. There are towns where that's been done to identify aerial photography, inspections.
getting permission from you to look into your neighbor's yard, to identify all the valuable trees and try to create that inventory, if you will. So there are towns that do go to that extent to protect their canopy, but I guess your underlying point, Mr. Mayor, is that if we do X, foolish for us to assume that there won't be a reaction by a property owner of Y to try to, if they're not well intended, to try to circumvent X.
I hate to think that way, but
I just
I'm
think that
forced to.
unfortunately, there's always, it's the 80% rule. There's always 20% of people who might try to
Well,
do
then
that.
I guess an inventory might be necessary. Can we look into how much that would cost?
Yes, we can go out and see what it would take to do that and bring that back to council and see if it's something you want.
I
Like to
think,
see that?
I think it's important and not to keep harping on the ribbon thing, but I could tell you, I am by no means a tree expert. And if I had a property that I was gonna send a demolition crew out, even if you took pictures and said, you can't take this tree down, I wouldn't know what tree you're talking about unless I looked it up. If you can mark it, it's very clear as to what tree they can't take out.
I'm not against marking them.
Most of the people that I've ever met that run bulldozers, they're there to do a job. They aren't gonna stop to look and see what that tree is.
And not to tell you sort of the list of uglies, but I've had that, even with marking it, I've seen cases where people have taken the marking off tree A and moved it to tree B because they didn't want
What a
tree A for some reason.
That's where the pictures come in, yeah.
Right, so, you can work with the well-intended people, but the people who are not well-intended, they'll always be trying to outthink us, and we have to be nimble.
Another thing, and it does seem like there is, certain people have a desire to go through and take, buy a house, they're gonna turn it into a rental or something, and they get rid of the vegetation, they put down rocks, make it as low maintenance as possible. Is there a way we can discourage that?
Well, absolutely. I think, one of the reasons the town has stormwater issues is, you probably have seen them through your trips through the town, where you see people who have their driveways, whether they're rock, cement, pavers, you name it, width of their property. So we have collectively taken some steps to try to address that, by creating percentages for impervious areas and other things to try to begin to address that. Question then becomes is when those people come in for maintenance at some point in time, ones who have gotten past that in the past somehow, we then are forced to retrofit. And we have been trying to do that. And we will continue to do that with your support.
It's the same thing with the trees. Now, we envisioning that this is only something for a new development or redevelopment, or this be triggered by some other or
Well, you could basically, I haven't had a chance to talk in depth with John about this, but there could be some minimum landscaping requirement for the town. And when people come in, you can't say you could be forced to do it tomorrow, but you can say when you come in for a permit of any type, they're going to check that you meet the minimum, requirement, whatever that might be. So, Chad, John, and myself can talk about how we could theoretically put some words around that for you to look at.
Could be interested in doing that.
Roger, is it your intention, just to be clear, to give you very instructive, what we want as far as maintaining, or I can tell you that I'm on the side of, at minimum, maintaining the tree coverage or the canopy, as you called it, or increasing it, would be my preference.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think,
And then let you guys run
it'd be good for that to get reported out today as a result of this meeting, that's the council's policy. And we're gonna look at what we're currently doing, and we're gonna present the council some opportunities for further enhancements to be consistent with that objective.
Very good. Okay, everybody in agreement there? I am. All right, thank you very much, Chad. Be busy, need any tree spotters, let me know. What's paying. Okay, the next item is traffic and parking. Want to take a 5-minute break before we get into this? Yeah, okay, take 5 minutes. Please.
trees on a Sunday at 4 o'clock.
Yep.
What's that? I missed that.
Call to council.
Are you ready? Call it back to, the meeting back to order. It's 1:33. The next item is traffic and parking. I think we pretty well covered the traffic part.
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Who wants to start this off? Bill?
I've done some research. Like I said, I talked to Rob and he sent me a link to a study they did. I also was told about a CRISPE study, CRSPE, which was done in 2001. And, you know, they came up with a lot of the same conclusions that I think we would come up with if we were to discuss it today. They talked everything from they talked about demand management, which is closing the island when it's full, which is apparently not legal. They talked about tolls, and I know a lot of people talk about tolls as a solution. But most people couch that with saying tolls, but people on the island who live here don't pay the tolls. That's apparently illegal by some 1935 Supreme Court decision, at least according to the minutes that I read from town council. But they talked about aerial trams, water taxis, as we talked about earlier. They talked about making a multi-level parking garage that was connected to the bridge, which didn't really have a whole lot of support. The one point they made is that transit, and the appeal of transit has to be greater than the appeal of driving. And there's a couple of things that I think that certainly limited parking that happen if we could make our transit more faster. Traffic load in the bridge as we do once you get to this part of town. And it seems pretty apparent that most people who come over the Northern Bridge don't go very far away from downtown, even though that's the destination. The study where he said that about 5% of the eastbound traffic or the southbound traffic, we're going to look at it, was passed through, and 10% of the westbound traffic. And that was done during a busy time of year and a busy time of day. Well, my inclination is that the numbers are probably higher than that other times of the year. But not being a county road, not being a town road, being a county road, I don't think there's a whole lot we can do. They did show a big increase in accidents, more than double between 2004 and 2006. Now, I don't know how relevant that is now because of the new road. It'll be a different situation. So that was kind of my research into traffic. Now, I have heard other talk, and I think that then Councilman Adderhill had mentioned things like trying to put up barriers to keep people from crossing, trying to put up an overpass, which would be a major installation, probably need elevators for ADA compliance. I don't know if people would really use that. When he talked about all the egresses that are coming on Estero, that people could just bypass the fences and walk, I would also think that the emergency services probably frown on having some kind of obstacle they couldn't drive over. And if they have to get by in a heavy traffic period. I think we all pretty much know that. Also, they talked about their idea of a traffic solution was not to get traffic going fast, it's to get traffic going steady. Because we're not looking to be a major thoroughfare that people can get through as quickly as possible. And it does seem like that area between like the current pedestrian light is and down to, like the scooters, that's kind of where most of the congestion is. It seems that a lot of that is pedestrians crossing the road to get across the road. I don't know if there's really much we can do about that for traffic. Anyway, that's most of the research I did.
Well, not to interject here, but I don't know that I agree with the statement that there's nothing that we can do about that. I know we've tried some things in the past where we've had people standing at the crosswalks, whether it be deputies or whoever, keeping the traffic moving. As you said, if you look, on page 70, that blue area is kind of where the majority of the traffic backs up, even out of season. If there's ways I think you can keep the traffic moving fairly reasonably, it's not going to obviously solve the traffic problem, as you said, people will just cross anywhere. They'll cross at the crosswalk. You're constantly stopping. And when you're stopped, then you get the licky, people are looking this way, they're looking that way to see who's walking around. If you can keep that traffic moving, then you stop it, let the people pass, then keep it moving again. But it has to be a coordinated effort. The base of the bridge down to, as you said, maybe Hooters. But all those crosswalks have people there. Is it going to be cheap? Probably not. But it's a way, or at least something that we could try, see if we can keep the traffic moving. You're not going to get rid of it, but at least keep it moving.
I think that, I like the solution that they were doing, where Times Square is. Because I know, it happens, there's so much pedestrian traffic, it seems like as soon as someone crosses, someone else starts crossing. So having people bunch up and go in a big group across and allow more time for traffic makes sense. I don't know how you can do that along a long stretch. The idea of lining the road with deputies or somebody to try to keep people from walking across, even if you trained people, if they got the idea, tomorrow it's a different group.
Nothing that's ever successful is easy, but
Well
you have,
said.
you have to try something. I mean, as far as communication, there's 10,000 different, you're a technology guy like myself. There's 10,000 ways to be able to communicate. Okay, let's stop them. Okay, let's let them go. I mean, it doesn't have to be very complicated, but I think it's something that we should take a look at, possibly trying, not for a month, 2 months. I know we had a little pilot thing that we did it, and it seemed, as someone that drives up and down there all the time, it seemed to me like it worked. I mean, that was only, I think, at 2 spots. But there's a lot of crosswalks between the base of the bridge and Hooters that you don't always cross at the same time. You have to stop for the people by Hooters, then you have to stop by the people by the Yo Taco, then you got to stop by the people at Crescent. So if you can have that coordinated, much like they're going to do with the lights at the base of the bridge and at Old San Carlos and at Crescent, if they're all coordinated, you should be able to make that traffic flow a little bit better. You're not going to eliminate the traffic, but if at least you can make it flow a little bit better so that cars are moving and not sitting still for 10 minutes, it's worth trying, in my opinion.
Well, I brought it up before, and just sneak in here, and I'm going to say it again, that Annabelle has a seasonal program over there that they use, where they have these volunteers, or they're not volunteers, they're paid, and normal citizens that they wear blue shirts or whatever their uniform is. They have them spread out so many yards apart from each other, and they keep people off of Periwinkle. They keep them. They have the same problem we do, people crossing all the time. So they keep them off the street that way. And I don't know how many there are, but it's probably worth going over there and watching someday in action, maybe around the holidays or something like that. But it works. It works for them. And
Isn't that because they have their own police department, though? Since we have the sheriff, I'm not sure we'd be allowed to have our own traffic enforcement outside of the sheriff's office.
no, I don't know the answer to that, but you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I recall that this conversation, recurring conversation,
Mhm.
and it was determined that those individuals work underneath or within the auspices of their police department, and that they have to meet certain minimum training in order to be able to eligible to perform those functions.
Well, all right, let's take it one step further. They have a huge voice contingency. Those guys do work under the auspices of the sheriff. So maybe instead of just putting one voice deputy down at the light, we could spread them out along the boulevard, and they could perform that function. Either way, it's the same principle. So that's just something to consider.
I think it's something to seriously consider, Mr. Mayor, because, Bill, I agree with you. Each one of these individually are not panaceas and don't solve the problem. But I do think if you take 6 or 7 steps, it could really help to mitigate. I do think there are challenges with the guardrails or the pedestrian rails, with all the driveways and outlets and so forth. But I do think in areas that could really help, not solve, but help. And again, as the mayor said, if we could get a force, and even if it's under the county's jurisdiction, we could certainly partner well with the county and make this work. And we had volunteers that could help not only direct the pedestrians, but if people had to get out on those cross streets, sometimes when you have to turn left and you're going against the traffic, you have to kind of see if the cars are coming. Somebody could briefly wait for 2 or 3 cars, halt the traffic, let them get out real quick, along as, keep the traffic moving, those volunteers, not just in that key intersection, just over the bridge, which are great, but if we had it a little further deeper into the island, I think that could really help the flow, not only just with pedestrians, but with also traffic. I'm glad the Public Safety Committee's here because I know those folks have looked at this a lot as well. So this will gel nicely into our, be a nice transition. I'm excited about the TPI crosswalk, pedestrian crosswalk, because I do think it'll prove the naysayers wrong, that people will use these. I think we could have one at the foot of the bridge. I think we could have one near the Lani Kai. I think those could be hugely helpful. I'm sure they're going to be expensive, but I think given the public interest involved with this traffic delay and just the quality of life issues that the traffic that causes, I think it would be a worthy investment for the town. So I think those pedestrian crosswalks, particularly when it comes to the comprehensive plan, we ought to figure out ways to encourage those. I just think there's a lot that can be done. The water taxi piece, the middle of the airport, I think there's a potential private sector solution there. I do think we could figure out a way to work with the chamber and all the hotels on the island to create some kind of a commuter force or a commuter program where we could shuttle people to and from the airport so people would not have to rent a car and drive around on the island with Uber. Once they get on the island, depending on their location, I was just telling Roger before, during the break, I had 36 people here the last weekend. Nobody rented a car. Nobody had a car because they were at the Hyatt, at the Wyndham, and they could walk across the street over to all the Santini Plaza shops and restaurants, and they never had to have a car the whole week. And then they took
That's a good thing.
an Uber back, and it was great. So I'm saying none of these are going to solve the problem, but each one individually and collectively could help to mitigate it. So I'm open to all of this. I think this is going to be, because the island is becoming so successful, these are nice problems to have, but this is going to be our number one problem that we could at least address, I think, going forward. And I think we ought to take a deep and serious look at it. Again, no panacea, no easy answer, but I think all options ought to be on the table.
And I would just point out, that I don't mean, sorry if I was supposed to say, there's nothing we can do
Oh,
because
no, I didn't.
I know there's,
thought you were looking
one
at it.
thing about the water taxi is I understand that there was actually interest in someone running a boat from Cape Coral, from the marina at Cape Coral to the island, but we
Yep.
didn't have any place we didn't have a public dock.
No, they do
They're
that.
doing
now.
it.
They do that.
They're
Yeah.
doing it now.
They have
I've been doing it.
South Harbor.
I think it's the Hyatt in Cape Coral. The
Westin.
people at the Westin, I'm sorry, and they come every day, and people love that. They come over here for lunch. They bring their business here, and
Works.
people. But I
So
think,
certainly us getting a public dock at down there Bayfront Park, which is one of the things that was on
would be
the
great.
docket, is something that'll help. I think also maybe along what Councilman Aller says, that we can do something more educational than enforcement. That instead of having people actually with flags or something directing traffic across us, we have people just suggesting to people. Maybe, the source of a lot of the pedestrian traffic across Estero probably comes from parking on the landward side of Estero. So maybe we can work some kind of educational thing through the parking companies, have them information to their customers to try to encourage them to use the crosswalks and help with some of the traffic flow, encourage them from a somewhat self-serving thing, that if everyone behaved a little more, that they can get to the island faster. So there are maybe some things we can do that are not enforcement related, that maybe we can start with a slow educational approach and where it goes.
Okay, should we move on? Will. Next item is street renaming. I brought this forward.
We can talk about parking.
Oh. We just did. I thought you just did.
We're talking about traffic.
Oh, I know. You mentioned the parking lots. Go ahead.
Though this whole, I didn't put this here, but it seems like there's we've got this big consultant thing about parking, and that's something that Councilman Adderhope was very interested in.
I think some of the parking solutions, as you've talked about, Bill, could be over the island, just over the bridge. We've heard two examples thus far, one more public than the other, where there's really an interesting parking opportunity on the other side of the bridge, on the North Bridge. And I think think, I don't know how much, I've talked to the people involved. I've talked to Commissioner Sandelli. I mean, it's on county property, and so or I'm sorry, it's in unincorporated areas, so it's not in Fort Myers Beach proper. So I'm not sure, because they're gonna have to get some help with the county zoning and with Lee-Tran and I'm not sure what we could do as a town to further incentivize that, but I'm certainly open to suggestions, because it seems like the more we could keep the cars off the island, and when I was running for council, I talked a little bit about potentially having, and I know the need is more on the north end, but with the trolley and so forth, if people could park on the south end and they could take that trolley, but when I see south end, I mean at Lovers Key Park, across the street from Lovers Key Park, there's lots of land there where people could park. If the shuttle could stop there, and I've talked to Lee-Tran a little bit about that, but just keeping the cars off the island in the first place, in a voluntary, positive way. And I think, Bill, enhancing mass transit is a huge part of this. But as you say, and I think Roger said, if mass transit has to be dependable and regular, and I know you've talked earlier about addressing that challenge, but I think that's a big part of the solution.
And I think, if the transit would get used more, then they would put more transit.
I agree.
Is the thing. And I know that, I think I've heard this conversation before, but people in San Carlos Island will say they do not want to be Fort Myers Beach parking lot. But I also think that if they would look at it, they would see that their main strip could use some activity. And I think if people are on foot and they're walking by shops, they're more likely to go in than if they're driving by.
But I think we've seen architecturally that parking garages don't have to be eyesores. They can be done very tastefully, and given some of the challenges on that corridor right now, they could actually be an improvement in the area.
Yeah. Yeah, and if the property owners are local people, they are local people, they're interested in doing it as a business venture, then the way we can encourage them and help them is with the county is to go in there as a council and support it.
Agreed.
As this is something that would
Agree.
help the situation down here, and maybe even a properly nicely designed small parking garage over there. Of course, that's still bringing cars, but it'll stop them there. A nicely designed parking garage there might even help their redevelopment down there.
I do think too, if there is an area, and I don't know, I haven't really looked into anything in detail, but if there are, enough area in a consolidated place where you could build a elevated parking garage, multi-story parking garage, then that would certainly lend itself to an overpass. Because once people are already up at a level, their car, then going across an overpass becomes a more viable
That's a
option.
good point, except then you have the parking garage on the island versus off the island.
Yeah,
So it's a trade-off, but yeah, it's a good point.
One thing I tell you, I really don't support is taking more land area and making it into parking. If you looked at the maps that were presented in the parking thing, we, a good, probably, to me, like 60% of downtown is parking along Old San Carlos, and so that's a lot of surface area just for cars.
This real estate market, that may be being looked at more closely now, as far as anything else? Any other comments? We'll move on. The next item is street renaming. Again, I brought this forward because I was approached by a citizen down on the south end who has a little street there. If you're familiar with Flamingo Street going into the beach, then right off of Flamingo going south, and then back to the west is Flamingo Court, or excuse me, Court Street. And apparently the owners down there think they can do a little bit better than Court Street. So they've approached and asked if they can rename their street Flamingo Court. Which, I said, well, I don't know that we've ever renamed a street here before. We'll just find out the procedure and so forth. And so we brought it to the manager and the attorney, and they've put together a little item for us. And how about you, Mr. Attorney? You want to opine on this here? You're not too familiar with it.
There's certainly nothing that prohibits. Really, the issue is making sure that, assuming that the town agrees to the name change, gets processed properly, with primarily the fire district, so they're aware of the name change, and that can get onto their database, as well as the county property appraiser, so they can change it as well. So it's relatively simple. You know, if you wish, and the council's direction is to write up a policy, we can do that fairly easily. But it's really the real work is coordinating with the other agencies on the back end. If it could be as simple as the policy of this body is to require the applicant to submit a form, which we can prepare and provide for anyone. And they come before you, they ask for the name change, you say yes or no. If you say yes, then it's a matter of coordinating with those other agencies.
I was under the impression from reading this that we really didn't have any jurisdiction over this. They apply with Lee County, they deal with the fire department and the post office.
Well, they will have to, that's one of the other steps. The question is, do you all want to be part of that?
I see no
Process.
need. They've already got enough hoops to jump through, and I
Do
don't,
you like the name? I don't know.
I don't-
That's I guess.
if everybody on the
you wanna
street
be
wants to
part of
change
the
their name,
process.
I'm certainly not one to stand in their way, and I don't see that this is anything that we need to be involved in.
I don't understand why the county would be involved in town street.
Not necessarily the county. It's, remember, the Broward County, the Lee County property appraiser is a separate and distinct entity
the
from
appraiser,
the
not-
Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, I see.
The same with the fire district.
Yes.
So and those are the two entities that are primarily, that all should be concerned with, is one for fire safety and the other one to reflect the proper name on the property records going forward.
Of course, they need to contact Amazon because, you wouldn't want Amazon not to be able to find your house because they changed the name of your street.
Well, I guess go ahead, Bill.
Do we have any jurisdictional authority? I mean, is this something that we can say yes or no on?
If you choose to do so, it's your
I
town.
feel no need to get involved in this.
I don't know if I agree with that, Vice Mayor. I think that, I mean, it's kind of
think we should be
opening
involved in it.
a can of worms. I mean, if a group of people, especially like this, only like what, 5-6 houses on the street, if they want to, name their street Mayor Murphy Stinks. I mean, they're allowed to do that. I mean,
Well, I've got to believe all the other agencies are going to have some say in that.
Well, I think there's three things. One is, if you want to do it, there's a way to do it. Here's how you do it.
Yeah, go
Pat them
do
on the
it.
back, wish them luck. Second, here would be, I think what Councilor Beach is mentioning, which is basically that we just say that we support the request. We don't have an objection to it. It could just be a simple resolution. We give them that resolution, we pat them on the back, and we wish them good luck. Third level would be where we actually facilitate, co-implement the change with them. And that's a whole different level. That's staff spending money and time and et cetera to do that. So those are the three possible levels for you to consider.
and I do think, for me, just not liking the name of your street when it's not necessarily just because it's maybe not colorful enough, not tropical enough, or whatever the reason is, it just doesn't seem to be enough of a real reason to go through, and it will inconvenience a lot of agencies, a lot of people, from the post office to the fire department to the sheriff to the county assessor.
But we don't have the jurisdiction to stop them, Bill.
I'm just going to throw this out, because when these types of situations present themselves, to some degree, it's, well, are we reinventing the wheel? Type in renaming of city streets, Florida. And the first one that actually comes up is the city of Jacksonville. All addressing and street naming functions shall be centralized in the Planning and Development Department of the city of Jacksonville, including but not limited to naming new streets, renaming and existing streets, assigning addresses to new plats, and assigning addresses for new residential and commercial construction. And then it has a process by which it's done. I'm just saying that for illustrative purposes.
Right, but we currently do not have anything in place. And by the time we would get an ordinance in place, they could have already gone through the process and renamed their street. So I just don't feel any need to get involved in this.
Well, it did come to us. So they wanted some guidance from us in one form or another. And the particular lady, she was here earlier, got up 3/4 of the way through Rob's presentation. I don't know why she didn't want to hang around, but anyhow, she did tell me that she has this first one is a good start. It's a very small street that only has about 5 or 6 homes on it, and they've all agreed to it. She said, except for one that she hasn't made contact with on an empty lot. So there's just about unanimous agreement with it. So, I mean, if they all want it and it's not offensive, I mean, my opinion is why not, you know? So anyhow, as to how, I think the town should have a little say in the matter. I mean, we don't have to hang it over their heads.
What I'm saying is we don't have any say. We could make a resolution saying, yes, it's fine with us, go ahead, but it's just a resolution. We have no ordinance prohibiting them from doing it. I don't care if they do it. God bless you, go ahead, do it. But we don't have any mechanism to get formally involved in this.
Okay, so should we or not? So
If you
should-
want to do a resolution blessing it, I'm happy to vote yes for it. But it wouldn't stop them if we didn't do a resolution.
And the one thing I would suggest, though, is the thing that seems to me to have a flamingo court down at the end of Flamingo Street would be a little confusing.
We already have Jefferson Court and Jefferson Street in Washington.
And it's confusing.
Well, you know, it may be confusing.
I think I kind of side with Madam Vice Mayor on this. I don't know.
They want it.
One, that there's a huge demand for people wanting to change the name of their street to by the resources of staff and an attorney and everyone else involved to put something together to create an ordinance. This time doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. As I said, I don't know that there's a huge demand out there for people wanting to change the name of their streets.
I don't think there is, but this particular one just came out of the blue, you know, so,
We give them their blessing and
right,
go through the
I
process.
mean, that's fine with me.
I mean, I don't want to, there is an associated cost. I don't want to speak for necessarily for the manager, or more importantly, but there's the cost of putting up new signage, the new sign, whatever that is. You'll have to conform to our regulations and you would then have to put it up.
Ask for a donation.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure the ramifications would be long because, you know, my mom passed away 12 years ago and I still get mail for her. Be a while for this change actually worked through everybody. They'd be getting mail from addresses.
Do you have your direction?
Well,
It's crystal
so
clear.
here's my suggestion, maybe to bring this to closure,
Okay,
that we just to bring a short resolution back that basically says that, you know, that, and I don't know what word I would use, has no objection to the change, and they, armed with that, could then pursue process through the other agencies that John mentioned, and maybe they'll be successful, or maybe they won't, and we'll wish them well.
okay,
And this mainly to address the concern that Council Veach mentioned, that, you know, someone doesn't proceed on their own without our knowledge is something that we would find objectionable.
Okay.
Stop there.
all right, fine with that. Again, I just brought it forward because this individual came to me and we'd never done anything like this before, so we've hashed it out. Here's the direction. Very good. We'll move on. The last item is, next to last item is the American Rescue Plan. Roger.
Should we defer this so that we don't keep our public safety committee waiting?
Well, it's gonna be very, very quick. If you just give me a minute, and if you're comfortable with what I recommend, then we'll be done with it. If not, we can take a suggestion, Madam Vice Mayor. So my suggestion on how to best deal with this is basically to the council, sort of a homework assignment, if you will. for you to take time between now and December's M&P to assemble your ideas and submit them to the town clerk individually. We will collate those ideas, 3 votes for this, 2 votes for that, no votes for something. We will get the idea in terms of, we see it as fully compliant with the regulation. We see it as, a challenge to the regulations as we currently understand them. We think that it's aerodynamic. And then we will bring that back to you. So then you're all sort of working off the same piece of the paper. You're not brainstorming off the top of your heads. That's our suggestion to you. And that would set us up to hopefully have a decision in January for us to move forward with.
Sounds okay to me. Sound all right to everybody?
I just think it'd be helpful, Roger, to get a little bit of guidance as to what's compliant. I
Now,
know,
we're sending out information where there's some information in the kit, and as we get information and continue to get information, we will share that with you so you sort of know where the guardrails are.
I think that'd be helpful because I know the Florida League of Cities is still trying to figure this out, where I know certain communities are testing this right now with proposals that may be in the gray area, and everyone's seeing how those pan out. And I just think it's going to be help before we put some suggestions together that clearly aren't compliant. I think it'd be good to have some guardrails and some guidance as to what's been successful thus far and what might be successful based upon what you've seen going forward, because it's a lot of money we're talking about. And I'd hate to have suggestions that are just not even germane to the regulations.
The reason I'm suggesting this process is because, let's say that somebody on the council would suggest, one of the suggestions in a Palm Beach city was to use it for a golf course. We get back to you before the list is printed and say, well, we suspect that that's going to be a very, very difficult thing to get through the process. If you still wanted to keep it on.
Stormwater management.
An easy thing to put on the list.
At the golf course, stormwater management.
Roger, if you would, just for the benefit of the public, explain why that's very important. I don't know that everybody understands the process of how this money works, even though we have it. If you could just kind of go into what happens if.
Okay,
you
so
do something.
typically with state or federal money, the way it really works is you have a set of guidelines. You spend the money and then you submit it with proof that you adhere to the guidelines and you get reimbursed. This is one of the very, very rare occasions where the money is sent to you up front with the guidelines, and the federal government has sort of undefined clawback capability. If you spend the money that in a way that doesn't comply with the guidelines. So if you do it, and it's if you pick a project and it's determined to be ineligible, if and when the federal government claws back the project, you're then paying for it out of your own pocket. So with all that said, and as Councilor Adderholt was mentioning, guidelines are not there. For certain things are abundantly clear and other things are very vague. Everyone's trying to figure this out. And when I say everyone, it's the Florida League of Cities, it's the National League of Cities. Everybody's trying to figure out sort of where the line in the sand is. My advice to you today and in the future will always be to be 2 steps ahead of the line in the sand. We don't want to be in a situation where we spend $3 million plus on doing something to only find out that we have to repay that. But I think this is a good way for us to be able to have a free exchange of ideas without someone feeling the stigma perhaps of suggesting something that may not qualify.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, last item is agenda management. Is there anybody that wishes to add anything to the list?
I think we need to add in the modified tree ordinance we asked to have produced.
Okay. Else?
We talked a while ago, and I just want to kind of revisit to see if I want to add to the list about the condo recertification. I think there was some feel that, hopefully the state was going to take it up, but I'm not really sure it'll happen, and it's worth us visiting and doing something, because I definitely have some concerns about some certain properties on the island that I think if they haven't been diligent with their checks, that there could be some risk there.
My understanding is that there is action taking place at the state level. Obviously, we will have to wait until the end of the legislative session to see whether or not there's any agreement up in Tallahassee on proposed legislation that might be introduced. But there is a working group that has taken up the matter. We can ask maybe our state lobbyists to ground, see where that might be. Add that information to you at a future meeting.
Okay, giving it a little time, I guess, but I think it certainly weighs on me.
I think I'd like to add there, to begin the discussion with the sheriff's office about the possibility of engaging the voice people in traffic control down the boulevard during the season, to begin those discussions.
I would support that. And I
See where that leads.
would support that, Mr. Mayor. And I would also encourage, when we talk to our Public Safety Committee, to maybe add that to their agenda as well to take a look at when we get that meeting.
Anything else? Okay, we'll adjourn this meeting at 11:09. And do we have tables that we're going to set up for the group? Okay, then we'll reconvene with the Public Safety Committee in 5 minutes.